Welcome to the Nebraskabilities podcast. I am Nate, alongside co-hosts Andy and Zach. And welcome to week 2 of the college football season. We didn't play week 1 as far as I remember, so we're starting the season off on a fresh foot against Colorado this week. Nothing happened, nothing bad happened. We're excited to see what the new team looks like, and yeah. But no, we played Minnesota at Minnesota in Minneapolis last Thursday. Strange day for a football game, but it happened nonetheless. And unfortunately, your Cornhuskers lost 13-10 to the Golden Gophers, or the Fighting PJ Flex, as some might say. So it was an overall kind of a weird game. There were some bright spots that I think we'll hopefully be building on. Definitely a lot of little things to clean up along the way as well, though. But it wouldn't be the Nebraska football team without a reference to just, if it is a possibility, it's a Nebraskability, and that game just encapsulated it, I'd say. There were turnovers galore on our end. Jeff Sims looked like a great impression of Tommy Armstrong. That was beautiful to see until he threw the ball. And other than that, the defense really kept us in the game for the most part. Had that little lapse at the end of the game that just gave up the last points there. But, I mean, they were probably our strongest core moving throughout that game. So that was interesting to see. Not necessarily unexpected, but it was good to see that they were at least holding up their end of the bargain. I think Andy was the only one that predicted we were going to lose. So, unfortunately,
Andy wins
good
the
on
prediction.
You.
1-0, baby.
Thanks, Andy.
I went really high. I think I was like 35-31. I went a little higher scoring than what either team thought was necessary, I guess. So that was a little disappointing, but
it's so funny
overall,
too, because we all said it was going to be a Big Ten football game. We didn't predict that much of a Big Ten football game.
Yeah. And it was, again, just kind of a weird game where I believe we outgained Minnesota, and just the little things killed us. I mean, 3 interceptions, not great. A backbreaking fumble to essentially seal the game. Really put the nail in the coffin. Again, wasn't all that surprising. It is a Nebraskability. I was hoping it wouldn't happen. I was hoping it wouldn't pop up again, but it did. And that being said, it's still game 1. It was excruciating to watch. There's a lot to work on, but there's still some good, I think, that can come out of this team. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Andrew, Zach, for just their kind of quick thoughts for how the football team looked to them and kind of where we can go moving forward.
Yeah, for me, sorry, Andy, I know you were just going to talk there, but I'm going to cut you off.
Nope.
I got some key points that I just kind of took from the game, because we'll get to deeper discussion. But you are correct, by the way, Nate. I do believe that we outrushed them tremendously. Actually, we held them to just 55 rushing yards, which is a great statement for the defense. I understand that, like, Minnesota's running backs are not, the Mo Ibrahim levels, but still, that's what they've done, and we stopped them from their own game. Just came up short in the end. For me, after the game, as I'm sure all of us were, it was upsetting because it's like, second verse, same as the first. We've seen this time and time again. And of course, they had to flash a graphic there. I think it was in the last 5 minutes there, right before the fumble or somewhere in there. It just felt like the omen was looming, and they flashed a graphic on TV that even said Nebraska's the worst record in FBS in 1-score games. And it's like, see, we had a chance until they showed that. So I just blame that graphic entirely. But looking back at it, we were 7-point dogs going into the game. So not to make the excuse of we weren't supposed to win, but we weren't supposed to win. And when you look at how we lost, it makes sense. but it's also impressive that we still only lost by 3 on a last-minute field goal with 4 turnovers. Like, I don't know if that speaks maybe to how poorly Minnesota played as well, but something else to consider. And we also knew that's what we signed up for with Rule. If you go back and look at his history with college football teams, NFL's a bit of a different game. But if you go back and look at his rebuilding years at Temple and Baylor, his first year, his record is 3-21. So many people that know math better than I do would say that's not great. Not a good percentage, but we knew that going in. Like I still don't necessarily think we're going to have a 1-10, 1-11 season or anything like that. But, we kind of knew that this year might be a toss-up of either really bad or really good. We didn't know exactly at all what to expect. But, and then Nate, you said it too, is that I think there's a lot to like from what we saw. The problem is you have to go back and watch it because on the surface, it didn't look good, but almost 200 rushing yards, specifically from our team. That's not bad. We'll get further into that too, but we did okay. Offense does look a little weary, but our defense definitely balled out. I think the two big things I took away were the defense playing well, but even if I didn't see too many missed tackles. There were some, but what I really liked to see there was, even though on the missed tackles, we had guys swarming the ball. So yeah, there might've been a missed tackle, but it wasn't like they gained too many yards after that for the most part. And then the other thing for me is special teams. Team that last year was god awful, definitely took a step this year and looks a heck of a lot better. Now, small sample size, just game 1, but still. Those are my quick thoughts. Andy, what you got?
So we definitely would have done this either immediately after the game or like Saturday, Sunday. My obviously angry head would have prevailed more than the calming thoughts that I have had since then to look back on it and reflect and everything. It wasn't, but I always keep coming back to, it wasn't, that Nebraska lost. A lot of people thought we would lose, including me. And I think it's just more of what we've reiterated. It's like, it's just how they lost, which was the part that probably hurt the worst. It's just always go back to, there's just a small glimmer of hope that Nebraska might be able to finally get over that hump, even if it's a new coach and new players, that this fan base can actually have some sort of euphoria for once of just getting over that last, those prone mistakes that we're always so used to making, and go down on a winning drive and go win the game and walk out of Minneapolis with a win finally. It's that's what I just keep coming back to, is it's just not that Nebraska lost, it's how they lost the game, which is the part that a lot of those mistakes that we talked about are very fixable, very correctable. Just those 2 false start penalties inside your own 10-yard line, especially the one that was called at the goal line, which, Gabe Irvin did score. And then the next play, Jeff Sims throws an interception. So it's like, that is something that's so preventable, so correctable. Both those plays, the false start and Jeff Sims, just being able to go through his reads. If you go back and watch that play, he went for, I think it was Billy Kemp, who was the intended wide receiver, but he overlooked Borkercher, who was sitting right at the end zone line, uncovered, wide open. All he's got to do is catch the ball and he scores. It's little things like that what you hire Coach Rule to do is just fix those correctable mistakes and fix those penalties, fix those mental things that, even if you get out of there with a field goal, you go in 3-3 at half instead of down 0-3 after throwing a red zone interception. And then, the other false start on the other end in the third quarter or fourth quarter, kills a drive. You settle for a field goal at that point. But, there's a chance, easily you make that a 14-3 game, or at minimum, a 10-3 game going into half or going out of half type of thing. But it's things like that hurt. It's kind of like the big groin kick that we're always so used to as Nebraska fans. And for once, they were like, this is a new era. We can finally just get over this hump. And I was definitely on that train after Thursday's game, and Friday into the weekend is like this, just the overreaction of this is, the same old story. Like you said, Zach, this is how it's going to be. Like, season's already over, sky's falling, so on and so forth. And then you sit back and you think about it and you're like, this is game one of a brand new coach, a brand new system that we all knew this was going to be a tough year. Like, we weren't, a lot of us, we all predicted a bowl game, but we weren't expecting a 9-4 season right out of the gate. If it did happen, it still can happen theoretically, but if it does, we weren't expecting that right out of the gate. So that's also the part we have to fall back on and kind of, talk ourselves into, is this is going to take time, and if, like you said, Zach, if Rule's track record is anything to show for it, this is definitely just a building block that we have to just get through and just go through together as a fan base, because there's nothing else that we can do right now other than just trust Matt Rule and just trust that he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's coaching. And, it might be a couple tough years, it just might be a long haul that we have to get into, but that's what I keep going back to, is it's game one. We just have to settle, relax, and just keep going into these games game by game. Now, Saturdays, and we'll get to Colorado in a second, but I think that sent a lot of the fan base it sent a lot of the fan base into hysterics after watching Colorado, how they performed against TCU. I think that definitely made the discourse around Nebraska like, oh, the season's already over, just made it much worse. And we'll get, like I said, we'll get back into the Colorado talk here, but that's just kind of my overall first point of, after having relaxed from Minnesota, having time to process everything, that, it's game one. We need time as a program to entrust Matt Rule of what he wants to build. I think there's just a little more optimism because this is the most talented team he's inherited going into his coaching career. But at the same time, we knew that the passing game would struggle, and it did struggle. Sam's himself getting, your big targets who we thought were going to show up weren't really existent Thursday. So that's also on Rule and his coaching staff, is, okay, how do we change that game plan game to game? How do we get our receivers more in focus and in depth so that they are a passing threat and a passing attack, and we just don't have to rely on the run every game? And we might have to this year. That is a very real possibility, is we might have to rely on the run to win us a lot of games. And that comes down to the running backs being a workhorse back room. That depends on our line being able to control the trench as well. But I'll pass it back to Nate we could go through the game, kind of the bright spots, low spots of offense, defense, special teams, and what we liked about the game before we dive into the discourse of Dion week, essentially.
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. And we'll just dive into the offense first. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. As you mentioned, we have the athletes at wide receiver. They were not getting open. Whether that's a product of Minnesota having good defensive back safeties, could be. There is some hesitation, a little, I guess, just hesitation that maybe our guys aren't the greatest. But also our wide receiver room is also getting pretty darn injured too. I saw Isaiah Garcia Castaneda tore his ACL during the game, so he's out for the season, unfortunately. So we are running on fumes, but as always, just got our next man up there. So we'll see who comes up. Maybe it'll be Heinrich Harbaugh. Maybe
it could be. That was I turned to everybody I was watching the game with, and I was like, that is not a normal wide receiver number or tight end number that we have on the team. That is one of our quarterback numbers that is out there making the first down off a catch.
Yeah, they did say in one of the postgame, I think it was one of the press conferences too, that that was a specific play set up for him, but that they are looking at those things. So there is a good chance it might see more of that, as we call it, the random Harburg-ness.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well.
Had to look at the notes real quick.
But you're right, Nate. We made a point last episode Rule was going to trust the veteran guys going into that game first, and now you lose a veteran receiver essentially. So now we might be looking at Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd to step up and lead those positions. If we don't, Bullock had the lone touchdown last game, so he's probably going to have to be more involved. We're definitely going to have to get our tight ends more involved with Borkature and Fedoni, who were, Borkature was really the only one that was existent last game too.
Yeah, and that was, I believe I saw on Twitter, there was an interaction between Fedoni and I forget who it was, one of the media personalities, but he's Fedoni is confident in himself, so it's still week 1. I'll give him a little time. I mean, he's been in line for the past 2 years, so
we would all love to see him ball out.
Yeah, it's give him some time to rev his motor here.
He was one of our glass cannons that we announced. So that's always the thing too, is is he going to stay healthy enough for him to be used well enough in this offense? And that's the biggest question mark. It's going to be there all season.
Mm-hmm. So potential's there for a lot of guys. I mean, like I said, it's going to be next man up. There's openings. I mean, and hopefully having Marcus Washington, I believe he was serving some academic suspension or something for the first half of the game. So
yes, he did announce that at the press conference.
Yeah, so hopefully having Marcus Washington, who's kind of more wide receiver 1, maybe 2-ish, but one of the more veteran presences there for a full game will help speed things along, get everyone used to that as well. And then just getting Kemp, I think, more used to the offense, more used to the system. Hopefully things get off to a better start there. Overall, the running game was interesting. Jeff Sims, boy, does that boy got legs. I think he ran what was 91 yards for 91 yards for Jeff Sims. Everyone else, I mean, Gabe Irvin had 55. Everyone else was under 30 yards past that. Anthony Grant, or sweet boy Anthony, had that devastating fumble right at the end of the game that really sealed the game. Loss for us. Ramir Johnson only had 1 carry, which was a little interesting because I know Matt Rule said that he was looking forward to incorporating Ramir a little more into the system. And I know he used him in the receiving game a bit, but didn't see Ramir quite as much as I was anticipating, which was interesting. But Gabe Irvin, I'd like to see him getting the ball more, especially going into this next game where Colorado's run defense is at least looks a little more susceptible. But he looked like he could be the real deal if we can just get him going and give him the confidence to be that, running back 1. Anthony Grant, it sucks to say, but he's going to need just time to get his confidence back up too. I mean, gotta fix the fumbles. Can't have them, especially towards the end of a game where it's only, tie game, 3-point game there. You gotta take care of the rock. Can't have those mental mistakes. And again, it's week 1, one of those things to clean up. But I know Matt Rule was talking about him having some issues with fumbling in practice a week or 2 prior to that. So hopefully that is something what he's incredibly cognizant of moving forward and something they're working on in practice. Otherwise, the offensive line, as you mentioned, Andy, there were the false start penalties that really, really hurt us, but there were just times where the offensive line looked like they have the past few years where Minnesota was in the backfield just like that, couple seconds, and there were times where the offensive line actually looked like they were picking up blocks and giving Jeff Sims a little bit of time. And so I don't know if that was, I would need to watch the game again to see if maybe that's, I think it was more bad reads, but if he just didn't have time in the pocket to go over his reads, but just inconsistent offensive line play hopefully will get fixed. I know Matt Rule was talking about Raiola being a solid foundation for the offensive line group and being that presence that they needed, and hopefully he can bring that group a little more stability and just a little more, I don't know, gumption to protect their quarterback moving into the rest of the season. Again, week 1, I will give some mulligans, but it'd be nice to see a little better offensive line play there. But that's kind of what I've got. Looking at the offense, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach for any of your thoughts.
Don't really have much else, I guess. I mean, you kind of hit on the key points. Obviously, something else to bring up, not to be like, oh, the refs have it out for us. That's not what I'm saying. But we had what should have been a score by Gabe, and it was overturned, which then led to that whole sequence was just the most confusing thing I think I've seen in college football in the past 5 years, outside of the whole disconcerting penalties or whatever that thing is. I can't even remember the name of that because that's
that's disconcerting signals. Flashback
there you go.
For everybody.
Signals. That should have been the trivia this week, but it's not. Spoiler, you don't have to worry about that. But anyway, that should have been that. I thought that was a score. I think a lot of people thought that was a score. I think even the people on TV were like, "Oh, that looks like a score to me." But unfortunately, that's where that inconclusive evidence comes in, and I'm sure they didn't see enough to turn it over or overturn the call. But you take that away, or you give the score there, and you're going probably into halftime with 7, not 3 at minimum, and like we did 0 because that then led to. That all led to what we saw happen at the end of the half there. And again, I did see some good things though. Touching on the offensive line, ironically, it was mentioned by, I think, Satterfield today that they went back and they watched the tape and they said even that a couple of the ones that they discussed, where they talked about people missing assignments and whatever, miscommunication is what it was tacked down to. And to me, I think some of these offensive line struggles and some of these offensive struggles are about to be expected. Not necessarily that we should just be like, oh, well, that's why our offense can't do anything because we're all new. Like, we're not the only ones under that scenario either. Specifically speaking this week, we're not the only ones in that new scenario. But I think a lot of it is explainable and definitely fixable. The penalties definitely is something that needs cleaned up. But I saw a lot that not a lot, but I saw some that I did like. I think Jeff Sims could be a good quarterback if he doesn't sight in his read every time. Seems like he was giving that away. And I don't know anything about playing quarterback, so I'm not going to sit here and critique too much because I don't know what that's like. But I do know that you're not supposed to do that. But if it's because he can't, get through his reads because of the offensive line, then obviously that needs to be corrected. And but again, our running game I think was very solid. I think that's going to be key going forward. Outside of the costly fumble, but really, I mean. The offensive side of the ball was definitely our weakest side of the ball. I don't think anybody's going to argue that, but I think they do have a good foundation. And I do think that the things that were there is something that can win, help the team, get the team to a win. It just, they got to clean up a lot. I think a lot of it just comes down to mental mistakes. And I mean, that's the game of football. Like you can't have 4 turnovers. You can't have 4 turnovers and expect to win the game. And the fact, I said this before, but the fact that we were even as close as we did, I don't call it, I'm not going for the moral victory, but I was more impressed that we were still able to keep the composure good enough where in previous years, Minnesota probably would have scored twice in the fourth quarter, based on how we were before. So that's really my overall thoughts. I'll pass it over to Andy.
Yeah, so we'll kind of touch on the defense and the special teams. Special teams will be a bit quicker, but we saw right out of the gate that Rule said, we're not going to be fair catching balls. We're going to be taking them out, returning them, everything like that. And first kickoff, he got maybe to the 20-yard line. And you're like, oh, well, maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. And then you come out of half, and then Ramir gets you down to whatever the 40, 35-yard line. in Minnesota territory, and you're like, okay, now we know why, we aren't going to be just fair catching every ball. Now we're going to be giving ourselves a chance. And that turns out the trick play that was almost muffed and almost tragic turns into a touchdown happened because, you set yourself up in positive territory based off that kick return already. Buschini, I worried for a second, Buschini got, a little roughed up on that roughing the kicker call, and he started limping. I was like, he was our only known person on the special teams that we had confidence in, and thankfully he was able to come back out and punt later in the game with no issues. We haven't heard anything's wrong with him, so hopefully he just took a nice lick and nothing groin wise is further going to prevent him from kicking. But Tristan Alvano made his extra point, made his probably 30-yard attempt or whatever far away it was. So he made his attempts. Now we're really super challenging, super far away, saying that as a not kicker. But in terms of, you take the average college kicker of, their range, generally they're good from 30 yards in, essentially. So we'll see if he has a bigger challenge, 30 plus yards going forward throughout the season, see how he performs. But, outside of that, I mean, there wasn't really anything bad about special teams. They tackled, they didn't miss any tackles on kickoff, punts, anything like that. So
I'd argue the most improved after last year.
Absolutely.
With how bad our special teams was last year.
So
it was nice to be like, oh, we could do something special.
Right. And that's absolutely, that was why I just didn't really have much points on the special teams, because there wasn't really anything bad to talk about, more positives than anything else. So that will flip to the defense. So defense, I mean, we knew going in this was going to be our strong suit of the season, and definitely they proved that they can play that type of game of a grinded out, type game where you give yourself a chance to be in games to win. You give your offense a chance to go back out there and try to win the game. And, kind of the same thing with the false start. And then the next play, you throw an interception, on that 3rd and 10 before Minnesota scores, I think it was Isaac Gifford, had the interception in his hands in the end zone, dropped it. And it's just like, you think to yourself in that moment, okay, 4th and 10, Minnesota's going to try, they got to at least get 10 yards to keep the game alive. They're not kicking a field goal here. And it just that sequence just shows you how important, one play in a game can be, and can be so costly at the same time. Is you think, drop the interception is not going to matter. It's still 4th and 10 for Minnesota. And, credit to the Minnesota receiver on that next play. Hell of a catch. Getting just like literally an inch of a toe drag in with possession. And Hartzog got beat on that play. That's also another thing, is he bit on the inside, and receiver ran a post right back outside. And, props to Minnesota on that one. They drew up a good play, got our defender to bite and, ties the game there. But I think all of us in that moment knew like that was probably the momentum swing that Minnesota needed after the Grant fumble. Is and definitely in the back of my thought, I was like, there's probably a chance we'll still lose this game after this. But defense.
So it was you. Probably. So it was you that did it. You just admitted that it was your fault.
I was happy for a lot of that second half. I think a lot of us were happy that second half. Another key moment is, Ty Robinson's targeting call. Again, like you said, Zach, a very easy mental mistake. You teach him like, hey, you can't be shoving into the quarterback after 2 seconds after he releases the ball. So he's out the first half of the Colorado game. It could be very important, could not be very important. Like, I don't know what we're going to go into that game. If we're going to need Ty Robinson the first half, Rule already made it clear he's probably going to play every single snap of the second half. So once he gets back there, but just another simple mental mistake that you can't have in that moment. That's a free 15 yards to Minnesota. I don't exactly remember what happened after that drive, but just a costly experienced defensive lineman that you lose for the first half of the next game with that. But, like we'd mentioned in the beginning, we held them to 55 rushing yards. And for a team that we knew Minnesota was going to come out and run the ball, they dinked and dunked a lot on us. But passing wise, I mean, under 200 yards passing with not a lot. Like I think that touchdown play was probably the longest pass of the game, which is like 30 something yards. So a lot of, we didn't give up the big, down vertical field threat broken plays that we're so accustomed to. So, and that's something that I hope Tony White kind of realizes is, teams might dink and dunk us. So how do you combat? How do you strategize to play against that? How do you get your secondary and your nickels to prevent those dink and dunks from going 4 or 5+ yards every single play? And if we looked at what Colorado did this weekend against TCU, a lot of their passes were dink and dunk plays as well out of the backfield, especially with Dylan Edwards, breaking off some of those halfback passes that you catch behind the line and then he breaks off for 30+ yards. So that's something we also got a game plan with. But outside of that, I wasn't, entirely too upset with the defense. I mean, they did what they had to do. You kept us in the game. They kept the offense with chances to win the game. But at the end of the day, yeah, it comes down to just the turnover battle. Definitely, if you're not winning that battle, like we had seen, you're not going to win very many games. But I don't have much more of the defense. We played what they thought they were going to play like. I still have confidence in them, despite them giving up the back-breaking touchdown play. But you can't put yourself on the offense. You can't put your defense in that position after a fumble. Is give the ball right back to Minnesota in positive territory after your defense just got your offense back on the field. You're telling them to go back out, like, hey, go stop them again, type thing. After the momentum completely swung, but I wasn't too upset with what the defense did. Just we knew what Minnesota was going to do, and we stopped primarily what they thought they were going to do, running the ball. We'll see going forward what Minnesota's like, if they just do what they usually do, start slow and they kind of pick up steam, or if they're going to rely more on Callie McManus to make a lot of their plays this season. But yeah, you guys touched on a lot of the offensive points. I don't really have much more to say other than, a lot of simple mistakes, just easy to clean up, and that game can complete 180 Nebraska's way.
Hopefully easy to clean up is what
yeah.
you probably should have said.
You're right.
There.
Hopefully easy to
theoretically.
clean up.
Yeah.
The mistakes themselves should
yeah.
be easy to clean up. Whether they do, we'll see.
And I had that thought. I know I texted you guys about it. Do those false start penalties happen when you're playing this game at home? Those are, one of those false start penalties is right in front of the Minnesota student section. So if you have that in a quieter Memorial Stadium, does that penalty happen? Does Nebraska still score in a type of situation without a mental mistake like that? And, you play the game that you play, you get scheduled where you get scheduled. I'm not complaining about that, but, just in an alternate universe, does that happen at home versus, your first game out on the road under Matt Rule? But with that, we'll kind of flip it to looking ahead to, what is already, like I had talked about in the beginning, we were all like, what's Colorado going to be? And I think now Saturday just absolutely elevated this conversation in this week for Nebraska. And, it's going to be 99% Dion in Colorado and then be 1% Nebraska talk this week, which deservedly so if you're, just a neutral college football fan and just kind of seeing what Dion has done already. But we'll pass that to Nate. We'll just get started with, what even Saturday is going to be like.
Yeah, Saturday I think is going to be a madhouse. It's going to be quite the game. We're Fox Big Noon Kickoff, so that's a nice 11 a.m. kickoff for you folks in the Midwest. 9 a.m. out here. Great state of California, so that'll be a wake-up call for me. But no, I mean, Colorado comes in, looks like 3-point favorite right now is what I'm seeing as the line right there. Although ESPN's FPI still has us as a 58% chance of winning the game. So
don't believe
to see
anybody.
what those all it all goes into those metrics, but I mean it really could be anyone's game. I didn't get a chance to watch the Colorado TCU game. I heard there was some reasonable questioning to the extent of TCU actually needing to be ranked, but you know, they're in the national championship game last year, so I suppose you wouldn't think they'd fall off that much. But in the past few days, I've seen tweets and things that are talking about how TCU's defense, even in the going into the national championship game last year, was like 90th in the country, and they lost almost all of their starters from that game. So it would be reasonable to think there would be a decent drop off. And I mean, you bring in a new upstart coach like Deion Sanders into Colorado. I mean, he's got a lot of the hype. He's bringing good athletes with him. Can't argue with that. Like he's got a decent program, at least starting to build out there. He's got the players. He's got the players believing in his message and his system. So that goes a long ways for turning culture around there. So I think it'll be definitely an interesting game. Hopefully our defense is a little more intact than TCU's, though. So hopefully we aren't seeing a 45-42 shootout. I think if we're getting into a high-scoring game,
we will not have the 42 in that instance.
No.
I was going to say, if we're getting into a high-scoring game, it's Colorado is the one that's high-scoring, and we're trying to catch up.
Yep. Hopefully we're limiting turnovers and hoping for the best at that point. But yeah, I mean, their quarterback, Sanders, threw for over 500 yards, which is, I mean, even against a bottom defense, I mean, that's still not a easy feat to do. 4 touchdowns.
I think they said that was a school record for Colorado, too, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was, the most yards in a game. So, I mean, still.
And, I mean, to their credit, too, they did it at TCU as well. So it was on the road. It wasn't a home opener for Colorado. So that's definitely interesting. But I think, just looking at the stats, they had 4 receivers with over 100 yards. So that is hopefully something we can limit a bit. But I do remember seeing that their run defense was a little suspect. I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but I think TCU had at least some success, running the ball. I mean, they put up 42 points. So, I mean, that's not necessarily ideal for Colorado that they scored 45 points. And I mean, if you're scoring more points than your defense gives up, I suppose that is something to hang your hat on. But hopefully we are able to capitalize on that a little more and can really make Colorado work for their points more than they had. And I don't know, we have Gabe Ervin and we have Jeff Sims. If their run defense isn't up to snuff, I don't see why we need to be airing it out more than 10, 15 times rather than just, keeping the defense honest. I'll be blunt there. Like I said, I didn't watch the game, but that's a lot of the kind of discourse around what has been said with Colorado TCU game was that they're susceptible. And I think Matt Rule is definitely a smart enough game planner where he's going to try and exploit those weaknesses. And hopefully it didn't work out for us against Minnesota, but if we run the ball 3 times, we actually have some success. And hopefully that doesn't backfire on us. We're not doing that in the fourth quarter when we need to be, or we do that in the fourth quarter when we need to be chewing clock and not just throwing 3 passes. And yeah, but I digress. I'll pass it over to Zach on kind of any of your thoughts on what we might see this weekend.
For me, it's just a few key points, really. I mean, TCU understandably was ranked, but I think now the argument that everybody was aware of is that they probably shouldn't have been. If you go back and look at the team they had last year, they lost a lot of seniors this last year. So whole new team there, not whole new team, but quite a sizable chunk of a new team and all of that fun stuff. But so the big keys for me from watching, because Andy and I did watch the Colorado TCU game and we're talking back and forth during the whole thing. The big key takeaways that I took from it are, and I'm not an offensive guru by any means, so if I was, I wouldn't be here waiting for that sponsorship to kick in so we can right off into the sunset as a podcaster. But For me, it's the keep it simple method, the KISS rule or whatever, the keep it simple, stupid. There were times where TCU would break off and do, 5-6 runs in their series, and they were gaining just fine. And I understand, passing every now and then to make sure that the offense doesn't, or the defense doesn't just start, closing in on you. But like, if it's working and you're able to keep running the ball, why change it? And we even had that on offense, last week when they came out after we stopped Minnesota and we ran 3 pass plays in a row. It's like, why? And again, I'm not an offensive genius. Maybe I missed something, but to me, I'm like, we were running well last week. Why not just keep doing it at least for one play? Like the first down play, which almost was a caught ball. I was like, fine. But like, to me, it's like, well, run the ball to give yourself an easier chance on third down. But again, that's why I play NCAA on Xbox and don't actually do the thing. So keep it simple, because I think a lot of times, teams tend to overthink these things. But that also goes for the players. I think a key for me is that Colorado is not Georgia. We're not going to play Georgia next week. This weekend. We're not going to play Georgia. So it's like, we're not David taking on Goliath. We are in a way, but not in the same way that a lot of other teams are. And so Colorado is beatable. There was a lot that I saw from the TCU game that, they played well, but they didn't play the greatest game I've ever seen either. And I think a lot of people that are like, oh, Colorado's going to kill us. I don't think so. I don't necessarily know if Nebraska will win, but I think Nebraska has the pieces to at least keep it, manageable. And I think that's the key there for me is, make the defense for Nebraska, keep what they did worked. They didn't lose the game this last week. So you keep doing what you're doing, but also, try to create more pressure, because a lot of the times you could see that Sanders, he played well. I'm not taking away from that, but if you got pressure on him, he sometimes would shut down. He'd kind of tuck himself in and take the sack when he should have probably just thrown it away, and he had chances to throw it away. I'm not going to say he made too many mistakes for just the sake of that's not what we saw really, but I do think he's susceptible to making some of those mental errors once you get pressure on him, and I think Nebraska's defense has the capability to get back there. The thing is, we need to set our secondary and everything up in order to get them in there. I do firmly believe that our defense is better than TCU's as well, especially because TCU is playing off their receivers 5-6 yards every time when they were doing a pass play, which then came into the dink and dunk thing.
That was wild. I said that the entire game.
And it's like, we kind of did it with Minnesota too, but it's like Colorado couldn't be stopped, and I put that in quotes, but it's like they could have been. Just line up on them a little more. But I'm not a defensive genius either, so what do I know? But so keep it simple on the offense, because I don't think we have the capability to put too much complexity in there. Defense, keep doing what you're doing, and then special teams as well. And then third, like Matt Rule has said, and like I think he's preaching to his players, the two things that I really like that he said is get 1% better. So hopefully that's what they spent this week doing, is getting better every day, as well as just play football. There's a lot of factors that are, going against what Nebraska is planning on playing. They're going into a hostile environment, very hostile. If you look at history, hopefully it's not that bad, regardless of wins or losses, but you can never tell. But just go in and play the game, forget last week, forget the game before, limit the mistakes and just play your game. And I do think that Colorado is susceptible, and I do think Nebraska could beat them, and they're playing a ranked Colorado now. I think Colorado's 22. Is that right?
Yep.
So yeah, for me, I think like we all discussed, there's things that Nebraska could definitely clean up, and hopefully they do. And I think that's where I think this is the game to prove, I think it's still going to be an ugly game, but I think it's possible for Nebraska to pull out the win. Whether I predict that they're going to win is different, but I think they could. So with that, I'll let Andy say his piece.
Yeah. The biggest thing that we talked about a shootout earlier, and yeah, if Nebraska tries to get into a shootout game with Colorado, you're not winning. You know, TCU ran for 262 yards against Colorado, and that, you know, we ran for I don't even know how much.
181.
181.
Yeah, 181.
Yep.
So, you know, we don't know what the wide receiver room is fully capable of looking like. So this might be an old school. We just run and run and run and run with Sims, Irvin, Ramir, all of them the entire game. And yes, that works in theory as long as Sims stays healthy too. But yeah, like you said, they looked very susceptible. And, you know, Colorado ran for 55 yards. And yes, a lot of that game was 510 yards of passing from Sanders. And I think, yes, if Nebraska can somehow even just limit some of those passing opportunities, just limit the big plays from the secondary, the nickels, all of that, and everything like that, there is a chance that Nebraska can stay in this game and keep this game very close and competitive and even win this game. So there's that. And I think I look back at, you know, the time of possession for Colorado and TCU. You know, Colorado had the ball for 5-6 more minutes than TCU did that entire game. And that worked. I mean, yes, the game was close because you can usually tell by the time of possession, you know, who dominates one over the other. But, you know, if TCU is scoring 2 minutes after Colorado scores and Colorado come out scoring 3 minutes after that. So if Nebraska just takes care of the ball, controls the game of possession like they did against Minnesota, that game was pretty much 30-30 between Nebraska and Minnesota of time of possession. And we saw that a lot last year where it was always like 40-20. You know, Nebraska would always be, you know, having 3 and outs every single drive. And if Nebraska can just sustain drives, kill the clock, run the ball, there is, yes, like we saw last week, there's a chance they stay in this game. There's a chance they win this game, and you limit the amount of times that Colorado has the ball on offense for Sanders and Travis Hunter and all of them to attack and, you know, put up the big plays and big numbers. So that, I think, is my key stat is Nebraska just needs to come out, focus on what they know they're good at doing. It's running the ball right now. You know, again, sample size is 1 game, so you take that what you will, but they proved that they can run the ball. They proved that they can mix it up with Sims and run the read option, run it effectively. Sims can prove that if he's dropping back, he's able to scramble and get more yards out of the pocket if the passing options aren't open. You know, he just needs to fix his reads and, you know, not staring down a defender where 2 of those interceptions he did, and Minnesota read it perfectly. So, you know, hopefully they're working with him, making sure, you know, he goes through his progression, makes his reads, all of that. And I think that is the key to beating Colorado is just control the clock, control the time of possession. Don't get into a shootout with them, because if you do, you're not going to unless the offense somehow changes this week, we're not going to be capable of winning that game if it's a shootout. So that is my biggest key, is assuming that the defense is playing like they did against Minnesota, that we can trust them to, you know, limit the big plays on Colorado's passing offense and keep Colorado's run game to a minimum. It's going to be interesting to see, you know, it's going to be interesting to see Travis Hunter if he's able to play 110 snaps again on offense and defense, which an incredible feat. His conditioning is probably top bar, but now
probably,
well, it is. But now you're playing 10 a.m. local time and that altitude in Colorado. You know, is he able to sustain again 110 snaps that early with that altitude playing a factor? Because it does play a factor, and you know it'll probably play a factor against us too. You know, it's not saying it's, you know, only going to affect Colorado, but it's something to keep in mind. Is he able to do that again, or, you know, does Coach Prime realize that and like, all right, I need you more on offense versus defense, or vice versa? So that's going to be another interesting aspect to see, is can Colorado keep that up? And, you know, whose line, it's going to come down to the lines. Is it going to be, you know, whose offensive, defensive lines are going to be better against the other team? And, you know, Colorado's offensive line look really good. Obviously, their defensive line did not, in terms of rushing the ball. They gave up 262 yards. So it's going to be interesting. Can Nebraska's defensive front penetrate? Can we mix up that 3-3-5 defense and kind of be able to get pressure on Sanders, be able to fill those holes and stop the run game and force Sanders to, make pressure decision throws and not have all of 5 seconds to sit back in the pocket and find his targets. Because there were a couple of those TCU touchdowns that TCU gave up that, the wide receivers ran the route, but he just had so much time that they found out a breakout way to break off the routes and get open for a touchdown. So are you able to get pressure on Sanders, be able to force him to make a mistake? And, winning the turnover battle is probably going to be another key factor in this game. Is Nebraska going to be on the positive side of this endeavor at the end of Saturday? So I think that, if Nebraska is just able to maintain the clock, run the ball, limit the mistakes like we had all talked about, there's a very good chance they come out, either very close competitive or, they do have a chance to win this game. I do think our defense is better than TCU's. Our offense obviously needs to get some work done, but, I think there is a chance that Nebraska does win this game Saturday. But with that, we'll kind of wrap it back around and start throwing out predictions and everything. So go back to Nate there.
Yeah, no, as you said, it's prediction time. And I guess kind of jumping off something you said too, one thing that does worry me a little bit with our defense is I did notice that we kind of struggled to get pressure on their Minnesota's quarterback for most of the game. We had the one sack, I believe, in the third or fourth quarter.
I say a lot of it was the second half where we started getting more pressure and be able to penetrate their offensive line. Yeah,
and who knows whether that's game planning or just whether Minnesota's offensive line got tired. Could be a number of factors, but it's definitely going to be something to watch and see if we're able to control the line. Like you said, it's going to be a big storyline of seeing who wins out there. So I think for my prediction, it's a tough one because it really could go either way. We could fall into some bad habits and it could go into a shootout that we really don't want to see, I don't think. Or we could, control at least part of the game, keep the ball in our hands a bit, keep our defense fresh, and we could have a game on our hands. And I'm hoping for that latter outcome. I'm kind of on the fence for a prediction. It's a tough one, but I will stick to my optimistic season outcome. We need this one for my prediction to gain some traction here. So we're gonna wish cast this one into existence, I guess. And I think I'm gonna go lower scoring than last week. I think defense holds and we come out of Boulder with a 21-17 victory.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, it's like you said, it's tough. Very tough. Because I know I just said, I saw a lot of things that I really liked and all of that, positivity. But I'm going to be honest. I think Nebraska is going to play a really, really good game. I don't know if I can say that they're going to win, but I think I'll stick to an optimistic take because something else I just remembered that we talked about during the game was the clock rules now seem to make those games go a lot quicker unless you have Big 12 defense playing Big 12 defense and then they score 84 touchdowns in a game. So it's constantly back and forth. I don't think Nebraska is going to play that. I do think our defense will get stops. So, yeah, I'm with Nate. Not as high scoring, but I do think Colorado just might edge us out just a little bit. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to say 27-24 for Colorado. I think Colorado, and again, I'd love to be proven wrong. I would love to be wrong. But in this case, I think Colorado is they've got a lot of fire underneath them, and Nebraska is still working out their mental fortitude. And I think it's going to be a tough game, but prove me wrong, guys.
Yeah, like you both said, this game could go very, very real world where this game goes both ways, where Nebraska goes in and wins, Colorado comes in and takes care of business. So it's very, very tough not to overreact, especially after one game of both new head coach eras. But I do think our defense is just a lot better than TCU. Just in terms of, we know there's more experience on our defensive end than there was TCU's. And I do think they do keep us in the game. I do think the offense does find some kinks, works out some of those kinks, and is able just to maintain drives and, score all the points.
I hope.
Yeah, I'm going to go Nebraska 28-24.
Wow, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, I was the lone one last week, so you might be right this week.
I feel like somebody has to be, and I
Yeah.
am the one that said 5-7 for the overall season prediction. So who knows?
But after reflecting and not overreacting like I did after Thursday and Friday, Saturday watching Colorado didn't really help either. But I just think we're a better defensive team than TCU was, and I think we will keep it better close and just edge them out very, very slightly. But the spread is only 3 for Colorado. Granted, it has flipped from 7.5 points before Saturday to now -3 for Colorado. But Vegas still thinks it's going to be close, and I do think it's going to be close. Now, over under I think is like 59.5 or something. So our score predictions are just right up there, thinking it's going to be that mid-20s range. But it's Nebraska versus Colorado, and it's a brand new eras for both teams, both programs, and not really any one of them. They're both trying to instill the history of Colorado and Nebraska into this rivalry. I know both coaches have been asked about it in their conferences this week of we don't really know much about it, but we know that, you're taught to hate Nebraska if you're here at Colorado, or if you're taught to hate Colorado if you're at Nebraska. So, we don't really blame both sides for we don't really have that much historical background for this rivalry, other than we know we're supposed to hate the other school. And that's what, that's what's going to draw fans. Most of the people are going to draw in to see Colorado and Deion and everything, but it's another opportunity for Nebraska to be on the big national stage. Big Noon Kickoff. You'll have your favorite announcers of Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt there on the call.
Can't wait to hear with how much Gus definitely did not want TCU to win, and how much of a homer Klatt is.
Yeah.
Nebraska could rip off like a 95-yard touchdown, and they'll be like, Nebraska scores.
Sure. Yep.
We'll get booze from the booth.
No, not like that. This isn't what we wanted.
But it's just, as much as us as a fan base probably wanted Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech to start off the season, Rule has to be looking at this as this is such a great opportunity for him, his team, the program, the players, to be put back-to-back national primetime games right out of the gate against, two very good opponents right out of the gate. And so I know he's telling his team that is this is your chance to make an impression on the country, on those viewers, on just the college football world. Is you get this opportunity right out of the state to stake your claim and just tell the world who you are as a football team. So it's another one of those things that, as much as Nebraska fans hate 11 a.m. kickoffs, we hate where we're at. We're also very fortunate as a fan base to be given these opportunities, because you could be, where Northwestern is, you could be Rutgers, you could be, Maryland's on the up and up now, but you could be those programs that don't get that national stage very often, and Nebraska still being the brand that it is. Well, as long as we win, at least we'll still get those opportunities. So, it's also at the same time, I'm fortunate as a Nebraska fan to be given that opportunity, as we are able to be broadcasted on such a large scale to a large national audience week in and week out, just because of what Nebraska has done and what Nebraska as a brand still is to the college football world and what it's trying to get back to. But with that, yeah, we'll just kind of wrap it up here and throw it back to Nate, and then we have an award to give out.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. We'll see what the weekend brings, but we have trivia coming up. We have our big Nebraskabilities announcement coming up here soon as well. But everyone's favorite segment. I don't know if you need a drum roll, but Fire into the Sun Award. It's been a long off season. I know you've all been waiting for this. I know we've been waiting. I personally have. I will speak for you too. I personally been waiting for this moment.
This is why I do the podcast, specifically for this like minute long segment. Just this. Everything else is just gravy.
But I think we are pretty well agreed on as a pretty well consensus person we need to fire into the sun this week. Unfortunately, he was a golden boy for us for the past year. He has a chance to redeem himself. Like I've said many times, this podcast, it's still week one. A lot of kinks to work out, a lot of kind of momentum to move upwards with. But Anthony Grant, unfortunately,
Yep,
you are the chosen one this week.
You could make maybe an argument if you wanted to. And I don't want to do this on after week one, but you could make the argument that either Matt Rule or Satterfield is the one that needs to do it, because if he had fumbling issues, why was he getting the ball that late? But at the end of the day, the idea is that the players play the game and the coaches coach. So unfortunately, Grant, who was playing okay, fumbled the ball when he shouldn't have. And I would like to point out, just because we're firing them into the sun does not mean that we don't support them. It's just, unfortunately, that's somebody has to be fired into the sun, and it unfortunately has to be Anthony this week. So
last year it was a lot of the offensive line.
Yeah, at that point we couldn't. We basically knew going into the game what was going to happen. But I mean, hey, they'll get it figured out.
Yeah, no, like I said, game one, it's a long season ahead, so hopefully, maybe with any luck, we won't have anyone to fire into the sun by the end of the year. That maybe that's the goal.
It's the dream, isn't it? For the award to die because we're doing so well.
We're firing Jeff Sims into the sun for scoring too many touchdowns.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if this doesn't
sportsmanlike enough,
if we start playing well. What do we get? I mean, I still feel like we'll just have to be like, we had a pretty bad play, like right there. We'll
have to be really picky about it.
I hope,
it was only an 8-yard run. We're averaging at least 12.
I hope we can do it, but we'll have to see.
But as I alluded to, it is week 2 of trivia. New segment we're trying out this year. We hope we can get some engagement here, get some responses. We have an exciting one. Obviously, Nebraska-Colorado, not a new rivalry. Been around for a while. Couldn't tell you how long. At least.
Oh, I had that. It's 1899. I think was their first.
Obviously, how long has the rivalry been around is not the question this week.
No, just their first matchup was 1898 when Nebraska won 23-10.
Okay, yeah,
that was their first meeting.
So yeah, I believe Colorado is currently on a 2-game win streak, if I remember correctly, but hopefully we can reverse that. But that being said, our trivia questions for this week. The initial question is, what is the all-time series record between Nebraska and Colorado? And if you're into bonuses, which we love to do, you get a special gold star somewhere for that. Yeah. What is the largest margin of victory in that game? And what year did that occur? So we're looking for the all-time series record between Nebraska and Colorado, as well as the largest margin of victory in a game between Nebraska and Colorado. So we hope to get plenty of responses there. We look forward to seeing your guesses. And Zach, looks like you have something to say.
I do. I vowed last week that I'd make a better system. But the good news is that because I did not plan ahead when doing this, we unfortunately didn't get any responses last week. So we'll keep that one up so that way you can answer it too, which is still Where did Matt Rule play? For what Big Ten team did he play for? And then what position and what year was the bonus? If you're into wanting to email us, which was the initial option, I've put that on the video if you're watching on YouTube. If not, it's just nebraskabilities@gmail.com. And then if you really don't want to do that, on all of our socials, we have a link in our bios or on the videos. Somewhere in there, you'll see a link that'll tell you, submit your trivia answers here. And then it'll take you to a form done via Google that takes all the answers. And it does not collect your email. We're not taking anybody's email, but you do need to put your name in there. So that way we just know who to credit. You can put joke names in there if you want. Unfortunately, we aren't going to know who you are because we don't have your email. So, just think about that as you're going into it. But hopefully it should be easier now. If you're listening to this on your phone, you should be able to click and go through it. I think there's a total of 3 questions just required for answer, which is the question itself, the bonus, and then your name, so that we know who to credit. But it should be a heck of a lot easier. And if you can get a hold of one of us if you also want to answer that too. So you have more options now to complete the trivia if that was holding you back before.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Zach, for setting that up. And yeah, like I said, we look forward to hearing all of your responses, seeing kind of what your guesses are for Matt Rule's storied playing career, as well as the historic rivalry between Nebraska and Colorado. So we look forward to that. And I believe now it is time for the announcement of all announcements. that everyone has been waiting for.
I hope, at least. I don't know if that was a cue for me to announce it, but I suppose I can since you.
Really
look at that! Tom Osborne just texted me. He's ready for the announcement.
I mean, I figure since I'm the tech guy, I can.
You sure are.
I finally got it figured out. So what we finally got figured out is that and a lot of people have asked me this when we started doing this last year is when are we going to do like a live stream during a game? And so we finally got it figured out, and we're going to do that this year in October for the Northwestern game, the 21st of October. Hopefully it's a good one.
Is it? Yeah, I believe you. Sure.
I thought it was the 21st. If not, it's whenever the Northwestern game is, and we'll obviously we'll be discussing this more as we get closer. But
you're right. It is the 21st. We're good.
We're gonna finally do a live stream during the game. I know we tested it after the spring game, and that seemed to go okay. So this year, this I think is going to take place on Facebook. So a lot of people, if you don't have a Facebook account, it's probably not an all bad thing at this point in life. But if you want to interact with us during that, you can do that on Facebook rather than YouTube, which is where it was last time. But a live stream. So unfortunately, we won't. It's illegal to actually stream the game on your stream, so it'll just be us talking during the game, pretty much like this.
No,
except I'll probably be facing that way since my TV's there. But yeah, so hopefully, if you're interested in joining us, we'll be doing that, and then we might have some surprises throughout the game while we play, while we watch it. But that part we still need to discuss. But hopefully you're looking forward to a live stream of Nebraskabilities during the game.
I know I am.
Yeah. I'll agree. Sure.
It's gonna be a lot of silence, probably,
or a lot of
either
cheering.
That or if it's I hope. I mean, not to dog too much on Northwestern, but man, I hope we can.
They had a rough off season. So,
yeah, they did. I think that's it. I think we're done with all the new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's all the announcements. We got our predictions in. Colorado's gonna lose. Like it's gonna be a great weekend to be a Husker. Like I'm looking forward to it. But unfortunately, like all things, it's a possibility. It's Nebraskabilities. So stay tuned this weekend for the big game against the Colorado Buffaloes.